Hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And I wanted to ask the question, why aren't people dying and leaving Saudi Arabia in droves like they are in Venezuela? And I know some of you might look at me quizzically or, confused. Well, it's because of the corruption in Venezuela. Okay, Saudi Arabia, they have a prince and a monarchy, right? So basically, anything that the king says goes. There's no voting, there are no referendums, there's, even the judges do what the king wants, right? So that means that there's no corruption. Because what? To me, that means, isn't it said that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely? So if in Saudi Arabia the monarchy has absolute power, doesn't that mean that they're absolutely corrupt? But there's nobody leaving Saudi Arabia. Nobody's condemning, lack of voting in Saudi Arabia. There's none of the cries that we have for, kids getting sentenced to death or women being sentenced to death for demonstrating, or none of these things, right? Isn't that strange? I mean, Saudi Arabia has oil, and Venezuela, for all of the people that are leaving and the people that are dying of hunger, they still have oil, right? So why is it that people are dying in Venezuela? I am going to suggest that the reason that people are dying in Venezuela is the same reason that people might be dying in Cuba. We don't really hear about it. We don't get news about it. It might be the same reason that people might be dying in Iran. It might be the same reason that people are dying in Palestine. Same reason that people are dying in North Korea. There are governments in different countries that are doing bad things, 100%. And as a result, we encourage sanctions against those governments. So, for example, when there was apartheid in South Africa, I think maybe sanctions were part of the reason that they decided to end apartheid in South Africa. And maybe it worked. How are sanctions and embargoes working against Cuba? How have they been going? How are sanctions and, well, not sanctions, but how has the blockade of Palestine and Gaza by Israeli forces, how has that prevented people from resisting, or, the Palestinians from disliking, and even all the other people in the region? How has that, resolved the issues with Israel? How has it prevented the issues in North Korea? I would suggest that it hasn't. Amazingly, somehow, these things that people have been doing, the U.S. leading it, they haven't produced the desired changes. And yet, president after president after president just comes in and says, okay, well, let's just keep doing that thing, because it's been working. I'm so sad even that Obama was in there doing that. I'll give you an example of something personally to me. I have issues with noise with some of my neighbors. And at one point, let's say I went to war. They played their music loudly, so I got my speakers and stuff, and I put it on that side of the house, and I played it loudly. I played it really loudly. But I have to admit that it wasn't working as well as I would have liked. Putting my speakers up to the highest that they could go it was not working the way that I would have liked it. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. But I had to admit, this, I'm not prepared to pay the cost. And, you know, there are other people in the house. I can't always put it up at the highest. You know, sometimes they might be upset with the neighbors too. But sometimes I don't want to have to deal with the volume of the radio. So I had to think, okay, number one, I need something that's sustainable. And I need something that's effective. And let me tell you, it was a bit humbling to say, this isn't working, I need to try something else. It definitely was. But surprise, surprise, what I did was I just turned the radio onto something that I felt that my neighbor didn't like, and I put it at a volume that was sustainable, meaning that I could leave that on for the entire night. And if someone called the cops about a noise disturbance and the cops came, they would not be able to say, yeah, that's really a problem, you need to turn that down. All it was a low enough, constant thing that, you know, like if he didn't like shock radio or he didn't like ethnic music or whatever it was, that's just what I did. And I have to say that at one point I wanted to say that I had won, you know, he'd gotten it and he'd learned. But that's not the case. It's a chronic problem that I will probably have forever, with the one neighbor at least, and maybe with others, it depends. But the point is that we found a way to sustainably deal with it. You know, I put on my music, he hears it, and usually he turns off his music or turns it down really, really low, because he does not want to have to deal with whatever he doesn't want to listen to for 24 hours, you know, non-stop. And it's not disturbing anybody else, it's just annoying personally to him. And I would say that it's the same exact thing with Cuba. It's the same thing with Venezuela, with North Korea, with Iran, with, if Libya was around and it was Libya, any of these things. If you try something and it isn't working, try something else or you just look stupid. But back to my point though, people in Venezuela are not starving because of corruption. They still have tons and tons of oil. I would say that, yeah, there's sanctions on Venezuela. I don't know. Maybe the sanctions are 90%. Maybe. I don't know. But there definitely are sanctions on a country where people are suffering immensely. And they have lots of oil. And but I think that it has a significant amount to do with the sanctions. The sanctions, maybe they are, let's say, legitimate. Maybe Venezuela went and took over oil refineries and oil platforms and stuff, and whatever the case might be. But the fact of the matter is, whatever is being done in retribution that is not allowing Venezuela to sell its oil, the effect that it's having on the populace of Venezuela has nothing to do with corruption. Russia is, I'm sure, pretty corrupt, but they're able to sell as much as their oil as they want, right? Saudi Arabia, are they a repressive regime? Yeah, but they seem to be doing okay. You know, they don't seem to have an exodus of people. China, is China a repressive regime? And, you know, aside from the trade war and this coronavirus thing, I don't see that the Chinese people are paying the price for corruption, because again, the Communist Party has absolute power, so then it must be absolutely corrupt. But I don't see the Chinese people suffering in that way. And there's the Cuban people. The Cuban people are suffering similarly, and they have been suffering for what, 60 years? For a failed technique, a failed diplomacy. Let's look at China. Is China open? Are there companies going into China, doing business in China, making money for themselves, for the people of China, producing, giving them access to products that they didn't have? Is China, are people able to go visit China? Are people from China able to leave and go study in other countries? Is that maybe bringing some freedom to the Chinese people? And yet they're as communist as Cuba. But no, Cuba has to keep paying. Venezuela has to keep paying. North Korea has to keep paying. Listen, there have been a lot of times in life where I had to come to terms with it, and I don't expect that this will happen at all. And as of now, I'm talking to almost nobody. But I just wanted to put that out there because I had the thought in my head, why would these people be starving if they're sitting on all this oil? Maybe they can't sell it. Why wouldn't they be able to sell it? Even if they stole it from an American company, couldn't a Russian company come in and pump the oil out? Why wouldn't the Venezuelan people or the person in charge there, Maduro, why wouldn't he want somebody else from Saudi Arabia or from Russia to come in and use their technical know-how to get everything back up and running in order? That doesn't make sense. He would want as much oil to be pumping as possible, just like Saudi Arabia does, just like Iran would, just like Iraq would, just like North Korea and all of these other places would want their products to be sold and to buy and sell, etc. I think that the hypocrisy and stupidity, don't get me wrong, I'm stupid lots of times. And I've mentioned it. And I was able to improve a situation that wasn't working. I don't know what I'm saying here. I don't know exactly what I'm saying here. I'm just saying maybe we should not eat the dog food that's put in front of us so complacently. Maybe the narratives that we've been told, if we just look at them, hold them up to the light and see if they make sense. Does it, improve my life in some way to understand the realities of the world? Probably not. I forgot to mention Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was chock full of sanctions, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why the people were suffering. That didn't have anything to do with, all these other countries are just as corrupt. Okay? If you have something to sell and they're willing to produce it and sell it to you, I'm sure you'd be fine. So anyway, this one is just frustrating me. But as always, wish me lucks. You can like, unlike, comment, subscribe, and or share. Peace.